There's about 57 million people that are age 65 and older, and almost half do not have enough money to retire, and many are thinking about working past 65 to 70, 75, or really until the day that they die. And unfortunately, the over 50 crowd in the United States is the largest growing population of homeless people. Okay, so what's going on? People just are not saving enough. Many of us, the boomers and the Gen Xers, grew up in a different generation. And it was a generation where if you save 10% a year, which unfortunately not enough Americans are, but even if you're saving that 10% a year, you know what, if you do the math, it's probably not going to be enough. And it's not going to be enough because in our parents' generation, many of our parents and their friends had pensions. We don't have a pension, and we have Social Security, but it might look different than what it looks today. Now, I'm not an alarmist. I do think we will figure it out. Janet Yellen, who heads the board of trustees for the Social Security Trust Fund, reports that as I record this, we still have 10 years of a surplus in the trust fund. But then after that, the current tax base and the projected tax base is just sufficient to fund 70 to 80% of what the benefits are. So we have a decade to fix Social Security, but that's not a lot of time in a political standpoint. And you and I need to be able to plan. So relying on Social Security, you know, I wish I could say we don't have to worry about that, but the reality, I do think there'll be a solution. I think we'll be fine, but the reality is it does have to be on our radar screens because over half of all Americans rely on Social Security to pay half or more of their living expenses every month. And while the average Social Security check has actually gone up on a inflation-adjusted basis, there's a gentleman by the name of Andrew Biggs that reports that the average family is receiving more now in Social Security than what they did maybe 20 years ago. And Andrew Briggs is a smart guy. He wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And that's why he says that folks likely need less money to retire today than they think that they do. But I want you to be cautious. Andrew would say if you have $100,000, you're likely, or more, you're likely going to be comfortable in retirement. And he uses government reports to back him up, saying, you know, people that have $100,000 or more in savings report that they are comfortable in retirement. That has not been my experience as a financial advisor for over 20 years. But this is Andrew's summary based on government data. So Social Security is enormously important, and we need to do what we can. Another thing that's hurting retirees is they did not have an emergency fund when they were in the peak of their career. And if they lost their job, they had to take the very next job that came along. They didn't have the luxury of waiting for the right job to come along, or they had to borrow expensive money if something unexpected happened. About half of all Americans report that they could not fund a $1,000 unexpected expense, whether it's breaking an arm, or having a healthcare issue, or your car breaks down. Over half of Americans say they couldn't cover that. They'd have to put it on their credit card, or they'd have to do something like a payday loan, which gets very expensive very quickly. Okay, another reason that retirees are in trouble, and something that's different for our generation than in our parents' generation, is just the reality of rising healthcare costs. Healthcare, if Fidelity reports that the average person at the age of 65 needs to budget a little over $155,000, it's $157,000, to cover their Medicare premiums and their out-of-pocket costs, things that Medicare aren't going to cover. So that's a big number. A married couple is looking at having to set aside $315,000 for those types of expenses. And I think that's very different than what it was for our our parents' generation. So we've got that going on, and we also have a time right now with high economic uncertainty. Both what's happening in the job market, but also, you know, the AI revolution, which as I record this has happened about 2 years ago. And that is changing the landscape everywhere, and in particular for white collar workers, right? Technology in the past has really taken away the jobs of the blue collar workers. And now we're all in the same boat here, where we have to worry about technology maybe taking away our job, maybe putting ourselves in a situation where we are without a job for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. Or we have to retrain, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Retraining, building up a new skill set so that either in our current job, we can climb the ladder, or we can pivot and we can move to a new career and start climbing that ladder, something that has us making more money. So having to retrain, yes, is painful. It's nice to be able to go home after a hard day's work and be able to relax and not having to worry about cracking open textbooks that many of us haven't had to do for a decade, 2 decades or more. But continuously learning, continuously evolving is a really important thing for all of us to do. And so the result of all of this is folks are living in uncertainty. And as a financial advisor, people that want to retire, their biggest concern is that they're going to outlive their money. And for many folks, that is a concern that you know, if they've planned and if they've saved and if they've worked with a professional, I should mention none of this is financial advice, but they've worked with a professional and they know, okay, it's not just the 4% rule, because the 4% rule can be nice. It can be a guideline in our 20s or 30s or 40s as we're setting a goal. But when it comes time to retire, you want to have certainty. You want to know that you can spend the money that you have in retirement, and you don't have to. You want to know how much you can spend. Otherwise, you're likely sacrificing unnecessarily. It's one of the things I tell my clients that have a pension is having a pension in retirement is enormously valuable. Even though I can do the math for them and say, okay, you're indifferent between a lump sum and your monthly pension amount if you know the lump sum is above this amount. Where there's the numbers, there's the numeric answer, there's the quantitative answer, but then there's the qualitative answer. How does it feel? And I can tell you that people that have a pension are much more comfortable actually spending their money. And so I don't want to see you sacrifice unnecessarily, both financially or from a time standpoint and the youth of your senior year standpoint, which is why I made this video up here that talks about why waiting to 65 to retire might be a big mistake. I'll see you in there.